I don't take any, the sales data from the team as a confirmation of success.
Today, we are talking about building Hinomi from first-time founder to a global ergonomic brand, still selling overseas and competing with global ergonomic chairs.
Over 20 years, I have been suffering from the severe back pain. Because as we all know, a good ergonomic chair, to a certain degree, lessen your pain. I saw this kind of trend or the change of working mode created another enormously big opportunity. You cannot move the chair from office to home, right, every week. Actually, you need a two chair. So essentially, you create double market size. Because our products are all in bulky packaging size, the handling cost, warehousing cost is very expensive.
Actually, I think anybody who does like manufacturing, they can relate to all these challenges when it comes to inventory management.
You as the founder or the boss, you try to work as much as you can.
If I were to do everything
Yeah.
today, if I'm not around, then this business basically cannot function anymore, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and it's not sustainable.
And I'm truly with you now. The busier the boss is, the laziest.
Okay, very good afternoon once again. So now we have a third episode of Just a Cow Away, and I'm very honored today to have our founder from Hinomi, Mr. Jerry here. And of course, today we are talking about building Hinomi from first-time founder to a global ergonomic brand. Now, today, of course, being a Singapore brand, but still selling overseas and competing with global ergonomic chairs players is not an easy one.
That's right.
So most people only see the final chair in a very nice showroom, but behind that, there's a lot of product design, cash flow stress,
A lot of stories,
yes, logistic headaches, and therefore today we are very honored to have you to can share more about this. So why not introduce yourself and tell us what is Hinomi all about?
Yeah, thank you, Kelvin, for having me here. And Hinomi actually, is a D2C brand which I created about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, and by the way, we just celebrated our the fifth anniversary.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah. So and I was having the team overseas to celebrate. And why Hinomi in the first place, right? I created Hinomi because I love chairs. I love ergonomic chairs.
Oh,
I love it to
interesting.
be. I love ergonomic chairs because I needed that. Because over 20 years I have been suffering from the severe back pain.
Okay.
And due to the injury, yeah, at a very young age. So and because as we all know, a good ergonomic chair, to a certain degree, lessen your pain. And because of the pain, I suffer in the university, and when I was studying NTU, I was experiencing days of nightmare with the pain. I even could not sit in the main the theater room, and I was constantly looking for good chairs.
Yes.
To when I
So it came about all because of the personal problem.
yeah,
that
that's
you
right.
are facing.
And through this searching of the good chairs and the researching of good chairs, I found actually a lot of the good ergonomic. Because at that point in time, I knew there were some the big brands like Herman Miller, Steelcase, right? They have the sort of the so-called the ergonomic chairs. At that point in time, actually was this is something pretty new.
Yes.
If you are not really in this industry or really need this kind of particular chairs, right? Most of people don't know what's the ergonomic chairs. Office chair is office chair, right? So then through this journey, I found actually there is the huge the market gap, which means because for those big brands, they are selling extremely high price. For example, the Herman Miller Iron chair,
How much is it actually?
Yeah, it's more than
1,000 plus.
USD, right? In Singapore,
Wow.
they usually
Okay.
sell at $1,005. So, and I believe there's a huge the market the gap between actually what the people need, like me, because we know a lot of people have back pain, right? And what does the market could provide at that point in time. So and because that I left my engineering job.
Okay.
Yeah, then I started to do the chair business, but I knew I couldn't immediately become a creator, right? A designer or whatsoever, because I knew nothing about the design, about the
So
manufacturing.
maybe a bit about your background.
Yeah.
What were you doing, or what do you study before?
I was study Triple E.
Triple E,
Yeah, NTU.
engineering.
Yeah, engineering, NTU.
Okay.
And after I was working as a semiconductor engineer,
I see.
process engineer for I think for 4 or 5 years
4 or 5
before I I switched to, the own business. Yeah.
Okay.
But at that point in time, I was also in the chair business, but more in the trading and wholesaling kind of business.
So
yeah.
when you started from a corporate job, actually what happens is that you were doing more trading business, wholesale business.
No. After I created a corporate job, I jumped into the chair business. So actually I've been doing the chair business for the past almost
It's 10 years.
more
I
than
guess.
10 years,
More than
right?
10
More than
years.
10 years. But in the first part of my, so-called the entrepreneurship, okay, I was actually building a company, which is more like a trading company.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a trading company. And we're working with the manufacturer. Basically, we were the distributor for certain, the brands or some manufacturers from overseas.
So that was actually your
Yeah.
first business
Yeah.
before Hinomi.
Before he know, but still in the same industry.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So when I realized actually, in 2021, the timing was ready, and then
T21, very interesting timing. It's a
pandemic.
COVID, right?
Yeah, after pandemic.
Okay.
Actually, at that point in time, pandemic was almost, done. And but why, I decided to do after the pandemic, because I saw a kind of, the permanent shift in people's, the working mode. Before pandemic, most of the people actually working in the office.
Yes.
But with working from home, kind of, the practice advocated by a lot of companies during the pandemic. So I saw this kind of trend could
You got it
last.
home-based
Yeah.
working.
Could
yes,
last
yeah.
even after pandemic.
Yeah.
And that kind of shift or the change of working mode created another brand new or the enormously big, the opportunity, which is the home office, and you see, okay, if you know you are going to work from home for some time during your next 10, 20 years, I believe it's reasonable for you to seriously think about it, to invest, a few $100 in a decent ergonomic, it's a good office chair for your home office. Or even you work in front of dining table, you still need a good chair, because you cannot sit in a dining chair, for 4 or 5 hours, it's gonna kill you, right? So I think this kind of, the permanent shift is the beginning of a new segment, which is a home-based, the
It's like a market and an industry.
Yes, that's right. That's
coming up
right,
from there.
right.
I think
That's
you,
right.
you did a very good thing is that you identify a very golden opportunity or the window whereby this whole trend comes about.
That's right.
There's an entire change in how people
Yeah.
is going to work, how people is going to live, and because of that, with your own experience in
That's right.
the chair industry, that's
Yeah.
what makes you embark onto
You see,
designing
yeah,
your own
I
product.
understand.
Yes.
So last time, for example, right, and
Yeah.
that, for example, there are 3 billion, the working, the adults in the world, right? And if you assume most of the people working in the office, right? So you need a 3 billion chairs, right?
Yeah.
But now, maybe half of them, or this, the population, they have they are adapting kind of, hybrid, working mode, which means half of the time in the office, half the time in the home, right? So which means you cannot move the chair from home, office to home, right, every week, right? So actually you need 2 chairs. So essentially you create double
Double the
market size. So you see how, how big the market is there. So that's actually the main, the vision I had, when I, started to do Hinomi, and which, initially was, is a primary aiming for the, the consumer market.
Consumer market.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where you first started with the consumer part, right? And of course, when you talk about building the product from scratch, so
Yeah.
now we're going a bit more in depth into the
Yes.
products. This is not like a service industry because you have like inventory, you
Yeah,
have to go
that's
through the
right.
manufacturing, the R&D, and of course logistics. And any wrong move can be very expensive.
That's right. Yeah.
So for yourself, actually, how did that first concept chair actually happen? I mean, we do have some of your current models,
Yeah.
but would you like to share that? How did
Yeah.
the first one actually came about?
Yeah, because it's all about the years of accumulation, also the experience, in terms how we see customers' real needs for this kind of product. Because I know for most of the people who have back pain or want to look for ergonomic chair, for comfortable sitting.
Yeah.
the major concern still be the the lower back, the lumbar supports,
they
right?
call it the lumbar
So you
support,
see, and our chairs pretty much focus on the lumbar support, and then not only the strong lumbar support, we make the lumbar support is fully adjustable in terms of the depth, in terms of the position, vertical position. So we make sure everybody, every user, can find the sweet spot, to support.
Fully customizable.
That's right. That's right. Fully customized. That's our strength of the product, and that's also one of the key selling points of Hinomi ergonomic chair. So I'm very proud to say, most of our, the models in the market, most of them, have the most adjustable and the most functional, the lumbar support. Yeah, and that's really indeed, that's proved to be right. Yeah.
Actually, does it help that you are an engineer by training? That's why you can go very in depth into the product design. Are you very much involved in that?
Yeah. And for most of the chairs, actually, I'm very deep, I'm deeply involved in the whole, the creating, the designing process. But I do have the, the structural engineer and the, the industrial design engineer who take care of the, the aesthetics part and the structure part. But for me, the main idea, then the requirement or the function of the chair I want to achieve.
Yes.
Yeah. Basically, it's all mastermind by myself. Yeah. Because, I believe I have the, enough experience and enough, the depth or the understanding, what a really customer needs based on my over 10 years experience in this industry. Yeah. So that's why, actually, when we launch our first product, H series actually is like a, this is back in
2021.
Yeah, it's overnight, it's success. Yeah, 2021. Our first product launch, in the global markets, actually, it was immediate success. Yeah, that's quite, blessing, and because actually that gave us a lot of the so-called the encouragement in the first beginning. Your first product launch is a huge success.
Yeah, I think it's quite extraordinary. In fact, when we talk about global scale product, and you started with one product, and immediately there was a success as a fanfare. Actually, for this part, right? Okay, maybe I'll go back more towards the manufacturing side first. How do you ever, source this manufacturing process rather than, of course, you talk about your experience in the in the industry, but how do you actually source for that part? Yeah.
Of course, and as I shared with you, right, even before Hinomi, actually, I had already been in this industry for so many years, right? So I knew some, really good manufacturers in China. Then, of course, based on the specific needs of this particular, the new products, under Hinomi, so I match the requirement or the product standards, the quality requirement or this, how or the complexity of the product to the existing pool of the manufacturers. Then I select few as the OEM partners. Okay. Yeah.
And going through that prototyping, was it difficult?
For chairs, right, manufacturing is the most difficult part is still be the tooling. The tooling, because for the ergonomic chair, right? For example, our chair has a 20, over adjustment points. So each adjustment point is realized or is structured through the different, so-called mechanism. So all this kind of, the adjustment mechanism is realized by the, the component design, right? The structural design. So that actually gives, the certain degree of complexity for you to, make a tooling. Basically it's a mold, molding, right? So because, either it's a aluminum or either it's a nylon or plastic, right? You need to make the components and you have to build a tool. Yeah, the tooling part is is the most challenging. Yeah, because it will not only affect how accurate the function will be, but also the overall quality of the the finishing. It's about craftsmanship, right? If you don't build the tooling well enough, actually your craftsmanship of the chair, the workmanship to the chair will be not up to the standard. Yeah.
Actually, when was that first thing that you get that that this thing is going to be a success? Was it a comment from your customer or was it from the sales? When do you felt that that particular spark of moment that, hey, this thing is going to work for you?
Yeah. Actually, definitely from customers, right? I don't take any, the sales, data from the team as a confirmation of success, right? Because, even a lot of brands or a lot of companies, they could, make, like a, millions of dollars of sales in, when they launch a product.
Yeah.
But in the end, actually, you will find after 2 or 3 years when you come back, actually the company even not exists anymore.
Yes.
Yeah, it's because actually, the customer in the end was not really buying, the satisfactory with the products. So for me, the customer recognition, customer, the confirmation, or the so-called the validation.
Yes.
Is most, the important to me. That's why, actually we constantly look into the, the customer review. And we seriously generally look into, the negative reviews, right? We analyze, all those, actually every day, we will gather all this, negative. Yeah. For any product, you will get a negative review for sure. Even your product is a little like a, top-notch brands like Apple, you still got a negative review, right? So we will look into the, we'll examine all those, the negative reviews, either, is a service or is a product, the perspective. We will, try to identify the area of improvement. Yeah, then through that, of course, then we see the trend. If the, the complaint or the, negative review rate is dropping, which means actually, I mean, at least on the product side or the service side, you are improving to a certain degree. You are doing the good job. Yeah.
And you are very engineering and very specific. So every steps you will analyze.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
right,
that's where you actually improve on the product.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes, it's difficult, actually it's quite emotional sometimes. When you look at it, you feel like you build a very good product.
Yeah, perfect product.
And
right?
and sometimes you look at it, the customer review, it's really, it's bleeding. It's really hurting. Or it's, sometimes you will, become, self-questioning whether, I'm building the right product, right? But, this kind of process, I think is very necessary. It's very important. It's a self-reflection and on the, because sometimes, we will tend to be covered by the, the rosy, the pictures of the, your sales team tell you, okay, this month, the 30-20% increase of the sales, right? But actually, in the back end, right, there are a lot of, the noise. And for me, those kind of noise are more critical. Yeah, and for me, it's more important to look at it. That's why we have to keep, be cool all the time. And look at the negative side of the business. Yeah, try to to tackle those issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing the manufacturing part. So now we come a bit more into the deep diving of the cash flow management.
Yeah.
Okay, so all founders definitely can relate. Cash flow is the bloodline of all industries.
Cash is king.
Cash is king. Yes, correct. So when people see sales and of course things are going well, like we say when revenue is increasing, definitely it seems like a rosy picture. But I think one of the main costs for consideration is always inventory, right? How do you manage the inventory costs? Because definitely for you, that is the big part.
Because you see, and we, actually, this is I can talk about for hours, right? Because this is simply, the one of the most important issue for us, right?
Yes.
Because we have so many operations all over the world, and we build, we have the the different warehouse, right? For example, in US we have 3 warehouse. In in Europe, including UK, we have 3 warehouse. In Japan we have. In Singapore, we have warehouse, and because the seasonality, and also the nature of the online business, right? Because you will conduct some sales campaigns, from time to time, and a sales campaign will make actually the the fluctuation of the stock level. So you have to be very well at the planning, forecasting, and execution on the on the stock replenishment or stock planning. And for us, actually, we use kind of so-called flexible, kind of system, or the we make sure actually each location or each warehouse, the supply will be flexible enough, which means actually, and they will also support each other. Okay. What do I mean by actually the different warehouse support each other? We will actually based on the certain the forecasting model we built. Actually, for example, the warehouse A, this area, the west part of the the USA, right? We foresee the sales will be increased, and but we have the difficulty replenishment in the near term. Then actually we will use the another warehouse in USA, for example, warehouse B or C, to support that. We will basically we will, you know, cross
So there's actually a lot of
cross replenishment.
calculation.
That's right.
planning
It's a
beforehand,
very
yeah.
flexible, you know, kind of soft kind of, you know, system rather than very rigid, static.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, you know, then the forecasting, you know, the model is important. Now because with you know, the AI tools, you know, all those kind of, you know, the mathematics, you know, the forecasting tools, it makes actually things slightly, you know, easier for us. If, you know, you just based on the, you know, the human kind of, you know, estimation or the, you know, the knowledge or the experience is way insufficient. Actually, we experience some, you know, the really, I mean, some painful kind of moments, you know, just because, you know, the inventory management failure. Yeah. And it caused, you know, the huge amount of obsolete stocks for certain SKU. And as you know, you know, because our products are all in, you know, in bulky, you know, packaging size. Actually, the, you know, warehousing cost is very expensive, you know. And not only that, actually the handling cost, you know, also, you know, tremendously, you know, increase.
Definitely, I think anybody who does like manufacturing, they can relate to all these, you know, challenges when it comes to inventory management. Actually, before this, right, we actually skip one question. Actually, I want to ask all business founders, right,
Yeah.
for first time, how much capital do you actually started with for this business?
You know, for us, you know, we
Yes.
started with $1 million. Yeah.
Okay.
And because it's not a lot of money, but you know, actually,
But for manufacturing, it's considered.
yeah. But for
not-
us, actually, you
yeah.
know, of course, you know, we were, you know, relatively, you know, lucky enough because, you know, with a good relationship with, you know, the manufacturer in the beginning, right?
Yes.
Actually, we are able to secure some credit term.
Oh, that's nice. So you actually rely on your previous experience in the business to
The
do some
relationship,
credit
you know,
terms.
yeah, that's right. And
okay.
then, you know, then with the $1 million, actually, the seed fund, actually, you can invest in the staffing, you know, the manpower and the operations, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Then naturally, you know, when the sales come in, then, you know, your cash flow will be normalized.
Yeah. Okay. So second part to the financing of the business, of course, we talk about when growth comes, like when you mentioned, okay, that's where your cash need also explode, right?
Yeah,
and
that's right.
how do you actually use financing in your own advantage? Like when do you decided that no, this capital or this revenue may not be enough, let's take on further financing? Is there a moment for you like that, the decision point?
To be honest, you know, up until now,
Yes.
we are fortunate enough, you know, not really
Wow.
to you know, to worry about the, you know, the cash
Oh, that's
flow
good,
and
that's
the
good, yeah.
financing. Actually, we never take any bank loan
Wow.
until now.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Really
Yeah.
amazing. I
And,
think coincidentally, our previous interviewee Vincent, same thing. He also didn't take out any financing. So
Yeah.
there's always a good news for business owners.
But it's actually, for me, you know, taking loan or, you know, taking external financing, to a certain, you know, stage is necessary, and it's a good thing. I'm fully embrace those this kind of, the channels if the, the time arise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would be
And,
the time for you, or what kind of condition must be set?
Okay,
correct?
for example, you know, and so you need to massively invest into the R&D. For example, that's what we are doing now. Okay, we are invest, you know, hugely into the R&D at the moment. So we are, you know, because now all this kind of hardware, you know, chair is a hardware, right? I want to make the hardware more, you know, smarter, more intelligent. Probably will be, you know, integrate some AI features. So that's why, you know, I'm gonna to build a intelligent ergonomic chair, and this involves a lot of, you know, the R&D, you know, the effects, you know, also in terms, you know, the investment. So, but as it's still fine at this stage. But, you know, if in the future, you know, if we scale up the R&D, you know, efforts, then probably I need some, you know, the external, you know, the support. Yeah, I'm open to all sorts of, you know,
If you don't
channel
mind
for financing,
sharing
yeah.
right now, at your current stage,
Yeah.
how much top line are you looking at?
Yeah,
Currently.
you mean the revenue?
Yeah, revenue.
I'm looking at 100 million,
100 million
USD.
USD.
Yeah,
Yes.
but I think it we should hit that pretty soon. Yeah.
So actually, within the 5 years, right? To be
Yeah.
honest, you have actually ventured up to what we call beyond the SME kind of company scale. Because in Singapore, SME is called 50 to 100 million. That's
Yeah.
what we know, right? Because I do SME commercial banking.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
Yeah.
So that is actually way beyond.
That's our the immediate the kind of the target as a KPI set for the team.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that's in terms of top line. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Actually, of course, a lot of times we also ask from founders, what are some of the lessons they learn? Especially let's say for what do you think is your biggest money mistake that you make as a founder?
Okay.
Care to share?
Okay. Probably yeah, definitely nothing is is a secret. And for me, I think the biggest mistake I made, in the initial stage of the of the startup, right? I was too hardworking myself.
Okay.
I tend to do a lot of things myself. I was not enough thinking about how to to delegate, to empower the team.
Yeah.
Let them do. Actually, now I'm convinced. A lot of actually my so-called peer entrepreneur they share with me. A boss need to be lazy sometimes. No. It's true.
Yes, it's true.
It's true.
Yeah,
It's true. It sounds like okay, something a lot of people might not believe, but I think I'm convinced by now. Probably in the past, I won't believe. We all know we're Chinese, right? Hardworking is a number one.
It's a
So-called
number one human
the
trait.
factor.
Yes.
You can succeed your business.
Yeah.
But I'm convinced now, you are a very hardworking boss. Yes, there's a higher chance you can succeed, but only you can succeed in a smaller business.
Okay.
Not, I mean, okay, I'm saying this in a relative way, which
Yes,
means
I
okay,
understand where you're coming
you are more hardworking than your workers,
Yeah.
than your employees, right?
Yes.
You have to delegate and empower your employee, your team to take more responsibility. Then the business can really scale faster, and the team can become mature sooner. And that's, I believe, is more important than you as a the founder or the boss. You try to work as much as you can.
I
So
believe there was a
yeah.
saying that
Yeah.
comes about, I think I heard it from somewhere. If today, right,
Really?
a boss can employ somebody that's smarter than him, I think
Yeah.
that is correct.
That's
Because
right.
If I were to do everything
Yeah.
today, if I'm not around, then this business basically cannot function anymore,
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and it's not sustainable. Yeah.
And I'm truly believe now,
Yes.
the busier the boss is, the lazier the employee will be. It's true.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have
So
to.
you can roughly the
Yeah, we have
lazier
to-
the boss is, actually the more hardworking the
Yeah.
employees become.
And because actually
Yeah.
because actually at the end of the day the employee, actually your team will be also appreciate you give them the the more self-management or more responsibility, because they also need the growth, right? No responsibility, no growth, right? And as a growth, a responsibility is given by the boss, right? Yeah. And because some boss, the business owner tend to be responsible for all the matters in the company. And then of course in the end you like a busy bee, you busy around, and at the end of the day, I think what I'm saying is it's not good, because I truly believe you spend too much time to dealing with those kind of operational the tedious things, right? Because we only have that much of time. You only have that much of energy, right? So you bring will tend to have insufficient time to think about what is really the future of the company, how to strategize, right? How to even now how, for example, right, to learn something new. For example, the AI, right? I believe now the AI is excellent too, or the opportunity for a lot of boss to make up what is they are not good at it, right? Because a lot of boss actually they come from the background maybe not so so highly educated, right? So actually naturally in a lot of IT skills actually we were lagging behind. But now this the AI, the development, the technology, actually really, make up what is our, so-called
lack
the
of
weakness,
the
right? So we should
developments,
spend
yes.
more time to study
How to use
to
the
learn,
AI. Yes,
right?
yeah.
Rather than, to to entangle ourselves in the the daily kind of a lot of operational stuff in
Yes,
the
I think these are
company.
very
Yeah.
useful lessons for,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of our listeners or even
Yeah.
our audience, right? That
Yeah.
how to do the dedication and
That's right.
maybe we should entitle
We
this
have
how
to
to
let
be
go.
how to be a lazy boss next
Yeah.
time.
We have to let go.
Yes.
Yeah. And you have to accept, a lot of things, sometimes might be, run out of, the
Control and
control.
then
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
Because the lesson, then everybody need the mistakes or, and some problems, some thing, happens unexpectedly.
Yep.
It's also training for the team, right? Then, only through, the exercising, right? This is called the exercise, right? I mean, then they will become more capable next time when same problem, arise. If they never encounter, they never deal with themselves, right? You imagine next time, you will be the only person firefighting. Yeah, they will still, standing,
Yeah,
side to watch you, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let them be the center of the, the problem. Yeah.
That's good. I think that is where leadership comes.
Yeah.
Where you're doing that.
So when we
grooming.
always talk
Yeah.
about the, the elevation, we talk about, to grow the team, right? I think, the best is to put them,
difficult situation.
yeah, put them into the, the real kind of challenge.
Yes. Yeah.
At the center of the challenge, let them be the master. Let them be the owner, champion,
Yes.
or the problem
When
solving,
you talk
rather
about this
than the
difficult
boss.
part, right? Actually, one of the question about market entry, right, is
Yeah.
that what was the hardest country to enter as a market? Because you have entered quite a few different markets.
Actually, initially, we thought it would be France. Actually, why France? Because we knew a lot of, the consumer brands, or foreign brands find the difficult time in France, in French markets. But and because, the language, but it's because, it's a big market. It's a big market. And a lot of, the merchants, a lot of, the brands, they tend not to, let go. So they still, decide to go. But actually, in the end, I noticed a lot of the brands fail in French market. Maybe due to the culture, maybe due to the, the language, For example, compared to Germany, right? If actually French market is more difficult than German market.
Have you ever
Yeah.
your penetration to France market?
Yeah, but
Okay.
in the end, it proved me wrong because it's all about, see, there's always a flip side of the story. Because, I found out, why actually a lot of, the brands or a lot of, the merchants, they fail in French market. It's because they really didn't deep dive into the market, right? And for us, actually, we act, opposite. Actually, we really, in the very beginning, we were starting from small. We dive deep into the market by building a local presence offline. We build a showroom in the Paris, and we do a lot of, so-called the community works there. Yeah, we did a lot of community works there.
It's like our grassroots kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, what we did, for example, right? We
Yeah.
helped the local, the designers or artists choose the, the exhibition because we had some, nice showroom in Paris and a big space. So, and it used to be a gallery, by the way. So actually, why I chose an art gallery convert into a showroom because, actually that's something in my mind. I want to use it to actually, to do some artwork exhibition because I know that a lot of artists, the young artists and in Paris, and I believe, that's the kind of good, the entry point for you to do something within your capability, right? And I have such a showroom, and basically my investment is done, right? I just need to open this space to the artists, to the designers, right? And I don't really need to fork out the extra investment, but actually the kind of, so-called the contribution actually is significant and
So you
it's
actually-
recognizable.
You provided that space that I mean,
Yeah.
for people to come.
That's right.
Artists
And
to
you
display.
see,
Yeah. Okay.
And when people come, right,
Yes.
to the showroom, right, they came to, to
Maybe you'll find a place to sit.
and they will, of course, they will find your
Okay.
product,
Yes.
and they will, they will come to experience your product, to
Okay.
try your product,
Interesting.
and it's will, to enter people.
So the way you fight the market is actually to go into the community,
Yeah,
try
that's
to
right.
merge to their culture.
And it's just also, the philosophy and also culture thing, all about Hinomi. because we actually one of the corporate culture is one of the main pillar is about care. Yeah, care, right? Why we do in the economic change in the primary is also care for the the people who have back pain, right? But we want to enlarge or to amplify the meaning of care. Not only your back physically, but also care for the society, for the community, right? That's why, and a care for community, you have put into action. You cannot, a company can say, I care for the community. I want to do some contribution to the to the society, right? CSR, right? And for us, we don't really, shout loud, okay, how much we do for CSR, but we rather when put into some small concrete actions, like to providing some service to the local community who needs and who can really can really utilize for a minimum cost or even no cost what you can offer to them and change the life or change the career.
This is a very interesting point of view. Like, most business owner is just talking about how do you capture market share,
Yeah, no.
a lot of advertisements, a lot of social media. But yours actually more towards grassroots community work,
Bonding,
Yeah.
connection.
connections. Oh,
For me, actually, let's talk about, how the, actually is linked to the another big topic, how to globalize, right? How to building the brands overseas when you are nobody, essentially, right? And I think there's one good way to do that, but it's definitely you have to take as a long-term kind of, the view. You can't expect, this kind of investment, this kind of effort, will be immediately, overnight.
but you have proven your
Yeah.
success maybe
Yeah,
in 4 to
but
5
of
years.
course,
yes.
but we
Global
do
presence.
constantly. We do
Yeah.
regularly, consistent. Consistency is in our culture as well. We do something, we do consistently. So which means, okay, we do every month, for certain projects, right? And building the connection. So you make friends first, okay? I believe, the world is universal. It's about the human connection. You're right. People recognize your brand because they trust in you, because they have faith in you, because they know you are good, man. You are good brand. You care for the for them, right? If you come to the crowd, you start to immediately you start to to hard selling the product. No, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. You have to to maneuver through another different channel to build the trust, and basically to basically to let people know what a kind of company or what a kind of it's just like a person, right? You want to to establish yourself within the the new environment, right? You have to show people what a kind of person, what a kind of characteristics you are.
If
you
a very
are.
humane,
Yeah, yeah.
human
That's right.
it's
And
connections, all this,
if you really, you're Chinese or you are Malay or Indian, as long as you are a good person, you care for others, I believe at the end of the day, everybody will accept you. They will, and but in return, they will start to do business with you. You see, so that's kind of the very natural thing, building the trust through local community bonding. Then it brings the brand
It
recognition.
reminds me of a Chinese saying, 如果是要先做生意，先
Yeah,
做人。
yeah.
对。
You see, actually, echo with the BNI,
Yes.
the philosophy. Give
Yes,
us gain.
give us
right?
gain,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's right. You have to give first before you gain, right?
I think
You
Dr.
can-
Evermeister can give us some advertisement. Okay, that's good, very good sharing. Thanks for sharing about the overseas market. So, what I'll do now is that actually I will do this portion called the Fund Founder Quickfire. So it's basically I ask a few questions, but
Yeah.
you don't think so much. You just give me the answer.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, so we skip that. Okay, so let's say for stressful weeks, coffee or tea for you?
I don't drink any of this. I
Not
only
any-
drink water.
Water.
Yeah.
Well, that
Yeah.
explains your
Yeah.
physique.
Yeah.
Okay. Spreadsheet or intuition?
Intuition.
Intuition.
Yeah.
Okay. Sleep or launch deadline?
Sorry,
So which one do you prioritize? Sleep or when your product launch there's a deadline?
No, of course, definitely work is more important
Okay,
than
no, that's
sleep.
okay. You're a
But then,
workaholic.
of course, when, but we have, I have to make clear, and that's what I'm, the believing now. You never ever needed to push yourself to the extreme. When our age is dangerous, but of course you have to balance. But the work, is more important, or we always prioritize, work. But when it's really you need to sleep, you still need to sleep.
Okay. Hardest market to crack?
At this point in time,
Yes.
I would say it's Japan.
Japan.
Yeah. Even though we are doing pretty well,
Yes.
but from my experience, but actually we had some, tough time before we reached to our this stage. Even though we are still considered, the growing and establishing in this market, but comparing to other markets,
Actually, kind of think of it, I didn't ask you this question. Why the name Hinomi? It sounds like a Japanese name.
yeah, and Hinomi actually, and stands for highly ergonomic. So it's basically is a combination of these two words, highly ergonomic. So it's a Hinomi, and it works for us in Japan, because a lot of Japanese customer, think it's a Japanese brand.
brand.
I always, the first thing, when I went to the Japan and I talked to some, the clients or customer, the first thing probably they ask you, is it Japan a local
Yes,
brand?
yeah.
Yeah. But I
That
think,
was my first impression also when I first heard.
But I always told them, it's a Singaporean brand, How they say it's quite interesting. Why? Hinomi?
That's a good start.
Yeah. But I never
conversation
thought
start.
about it when I came out with this name. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's kind of, the
Backwards.
it's
later
a
on.
kind of unexpected. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. How about the most satisfying customer feedback ever?
Oh yeah. I have the few, the really touching, beautiful moments, right?
Okay.
And I just gave you an example, right? And I'm not sure whether I share with you guys before or not. When I was in Paris showroom, right, once a while, and there was a very, the old lady came to our showroom, and I noticed her came to our showroom a couple times in the past 2 days because I was staying there, every day. And every time, she was testing, trying the chair for like 10-20 minutes, then left. Even within a day, she came a couple times, right? Then in the end, I was really confused, and because I didn't understand the French because they were all talking to my salesperson in French. Then I checked with the French salesperson. Why is this, the lady keep coming back, but in the end never bought, right? Then in the end, I found out that because she really loves the chair and she thinks, she thought that the chair was, kind of chair she had been looking for like years, right? But there's one problem. And, because, she had a difficulty in bringing the chair upstairs. Because, for most of the chair, actually, the courier, the courier company, they drop downstairs.
That's for the France market.
Yeah,
Okay.
because, they cannot go up the lift.
Oh.
Okay. In the end, of course, I told my guys, what's the problem is that, and for me, it's no problem, right? And then we are here, and she stay not far away, right? We can just, to deliver to, for her ourselves, right? That's what we did, Actually, me and the salesperson actually carries the very big chair, and we're using trolley and I bring to her apartment. And I found why. Because the lift in her apartment was only 60 by 60 cm.
Oh,
You
it's
see how
very
small that?
small.
Yeah. And simply, because our chair is the package is usually is way bigger than that.
Okay.
So actually, she knew the courier company will be able to bring up, because the courier company will not bring it up at the staircase you
I
carry.
see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
okay.
of course we carry up, and to the level 6 where
Level
she's
6.
staying.
Okay.
At the end of the day, then we set up the chair and do the on-site demo again, help her to adjust. And she was crying at the end. She was crying, and she was so touched, by this kind of small, simple. I think it's very simple for me. It's really, it's something not so significant, like, because it's something it's so easily for us. I can do it, So, but for them, for this particular customer, she was so touched, and because maybe, she really needed this country. I found, actually she was working in front of the sewing machine, for
long
hours,
hours, yes.
hours, yeah.
Okay.
So, and she really thanked us, and, and so appreciate, and really give us some, very, very, very emotional. She was getting emotional, and was crying, and was so thankful. I think this kind of moments really, determines, I'm gonna to walk down this, the journey till the end. Try to help as many people like her.
Yeah. I think that is where you really found that your product can impact somebody's life.
Yeah, not only through product,
Yeah.
but also through the action,
action,
of
yes.
our people, Hinomi people. That's because I believe the service or the value we bring to customers should be way beyond the product. Because nowadays you see chair, you can always find a better chair in the market. Just like the any other commodity, right? You can always find a better substitute or the alternative, right?
Agree.
But why actually makes your product or your brand different? Because the overall the value you bring to customer, and I think it should be way beyond the product itself. That's what I believe. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that amazing story. So we have one funny question. How many hours do you personally sit on your own chair?
Yeah, of course in the office, of course whenever I need to sit down, I sit down in Hinomi chairs, and I always sit on our new chairs, because I believe testing. And actually, I always be the first person to test the new chairs before I formally launch the product. And after prototyping, actually, I will be sitting on the chair, if it's a new product, I will purposely sit down more, like for at least 5-6 hours a day, and just sit this particular chair. Then I will test it, and I will give I believe, because I'm quite experienced in chair structure, so I think I definitely I'm a good tester for the the new chairs. Yeah, so when the new product is going to launch, before actually formally launch, I will be the first person to sit on this particular chair for long hours every day, and I even ask my the older the senior management team sit on this chair, and really give me the we'll talk about it after a few days, see what's your feedback and experience. Then before it's formally launched, we needed to do certain necessary the modification, then we based on the feedback.
So definitely being your own founder and a business, this is something that you put in a lot of effort, trying to make it work. So actually, looking back, right, I always ask this question because being a founder and entrepreneur, is it worth it for this journey? But I think I found the answer from where you shared just now.
It's definitely I know the journey. Actually, not only me, a lot of the startup journey or the the entrepreneur's journey is very tough, and numerous nights of sleepless night. And sometimes the cash flow issue or the product the issues or some customer the emergency issues, right? And but I still feel it's a fulfilling and rewarding when you see the moments your customer, your clients it's really benefit from what you offer, right? Just like what I shared in the story just now, the the French lady, or your own the partners, your own people in your company, your team, right? Your teammates, right? So really you see the the glow, financially, or on the skill set, or you really see the prospect, and I think that's a thing. I think is the primary kind of the driving force behind the the entrepreneur startup, the founders to go on and on, right?
Yes.
And because you definitely, for me, I don't really, of course, I create the things, I will benefit for sure, right? In the end, financially or other aspects. But I would say, the more I'm looking for is to the the benefit will be for the users, for our clients, and for the people in the company. Internally, externally. Me should be the last part.
Thanks for sharing this. Actually, it's very interesting because every founder that I've interviewed so far, they have a different meaning to what entrepreneurship means to them. For you, I think it's the growth of all the people that is around you.
And I believe it's to elevate the people surround you, and to help them, to find you basically you build platform for them, right? And everybody can excel and can grow, I think that's the ultimate the mission or a lot of the founder should think about. Of course, at the same time, you grow, right? You grow yourself as well through the journey. But I believe the most important is the people surrounding you, people work for you, how you can grow them, and ultimately how much they can grow. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all these things. Okay, from you, actually, I see it gives me a lot of heartwarming because why? Very recent years, I mean, we don't really see a lot of Singapore brands growing globally. Yeah.
Actually, there are quite a
They,
lot.
they
Yeah.
are, okay. Not
Yeah.
that we really know that can expand in such a. I mean, I didn't know that it's usually within 4 to 5 years. I mean, you have scaled up to this revenue plus so many different markets, right? I
Yeah.
think you really
We
did,
operate in over 20 over countries. Yeah.
it really did us proud in terms of really having this brand, Singapore brand that can step out of Singapore. Yeah, so definitely nowadays, of course, hopefully when people see a chair, they can see Hinomi and the design behind it, especially most of us now, we spend a lot of time working at home. So thank you once again for sharing your story with us again.
Thank you.
And have a good overseas trip and continue to grow this
Yeah.
brand even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next time, we'll have something new. I will definitely come back
Oh
again.
yes, definitely. I'm getting. Oh, I was just sharing this.
Yeah.
I mean, this can be offline, but my team is expanding, so
Yeah.
I'm giving them some rewards when it comes to the ergonomic chairs.
Yeah.
Because most of us spend quite a bit of time in office.
Yeah.
So,
Because I at the end of the day, I just want to share one, simple words, right?
yeah.
Actually, the economic chair is simply, one of the, the most valuable or the, worth, the value for money investment, you can make in your life.
Yes.
A few $100, probably, buy you, the lifetime kind of, the health for your back. And I think it's important. And when you come to a point, really have the back pain, it's very difficult to reverse. Yeah.
Yes.
So you try to prevent by investing in some, at least some good, chairs. Yeah. And I feel actually, in this world, wow, a lot of people actually, the life is, we need to see this kind of side of the society,
Right? Yes.
And then in Singapore, actually, Singapore is very blessed. Singapore is very blessed. Actually, I would say, definitely Singaporeans, besides the hot weather, okay, by the way,
Okay.
damn, I would say majority of Singaporeans live a very comfortable and easy life,
I share a story that maybe-
because actually overseas, even in the developed countries, right? You go to USA, you go to France. Actually, a lot of people living
way below the.
way below the Singapore
the standard,
standard.
yeah.
Way below the Singapore standard.
Actually, what actually I had a few couple of years back is that my own story is that I had some failure in my own business before. So at one point of time, in order for me to support my family, right, I actually did some door-to-door sales. What I sold was vacuum machines, those big chunky one, but they can do like cleaning of the bed. And that particular job, right, brought me to see some of the we call it the one room, one hall families in Singapore. That means they actually rented flats. Yeah. That was when I realized that actually around me, right, there's also a pool of Singaporeans that we didn't really touch base with. Yeah. So when I enter the house, sometimes because when we do the sales, we need to demonstrate the thing. Yeah. But of course, sometimes you just felt that wow, these people can't even afford a proper bed. Because the bed is really dirty. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I felt that even when I go in and do the demo for them, right, or rather I clean one time for them to have that, it's just that thing that, how do we end up neglecting this pool of people?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, for example, the lady that you mentioned. Yeah. I mean, it could be a very easy thing, right? Anybody could just bring the chair out.
Yeah.
But nobody brought it for her until you were there.
Actually, for me, it's any consumer brand. At the end of the day, you have to, to build it warm. It's like have the temperature. We call it a brand with a temperature, right? So you have to understand, the humanity part of the story, right? And of course, the highest, the level is you integrate, or really, embed this kind of the humanity in your brand's DNA, right? Through your corporate culture, But I think, as a founder, we have to look at the human part
Yes. Yeah.
of the business, right? okay, human part of business is I'm talking about, you have to look into the I mean the your customer, the real needs, and your employee, your employees, the what does they really need, right? So rather than just look at it as the sales data or this kind of thing, lah, because uh it's like it's which come first. For me, actually I feel, if your customer come first, your employee come first, naturally actually the business will flow. Yeah, you see. And see, you see, it's all about, the which comes first, right? If you are every day you stare at your sales figure, you try to squeeze, you try to exploit the employee, you know then actually it's not gonna work, yeah. So it's about actually which come first, which come first. So just like go overseas, right? And you have to look at it as how you can contribute first to the local community
Yeah.
before
That's
you
one very,
before you
very
look
good
at it as
point.
okay,
Yeah.
why a lot of people think why it's so difficult to do business there open shops close down and no business, right? Because they didn't look at understand the human nature, right? Why as a a stranger, why I have to when first time I meet, right? Just like just like a girl and a boy, right? In the first time dates, right? How can the girl can commit to you, in the first place, right? It's the most impossible unless you are really like them, like yeah. But for most of the scenarios, right? Actually, you have to prove to the girl you are trustworthy person, you are really, I mean, the decent person, you have the heart, and you are there to care, you are there to help, you are there to to love, right? So then then she can commit to you by if in the business world they will do business with you, right?
Yours is really the business with a heart. Yeah, that's what I can say. Yeah. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you, thank you. Yeah. Gives me a lot of food for thoughts that later on.
But it's it's easy to I mean to do what we believe for the small company, when actually if we don't care this kind of aspect of this business, right? When the business okay, maybe you are still fortunate enough to grow the business to very big, but at that stage you start to to implant this kind of DNA into the company will be even more difficult. Yeah, because with the vast the number of the employee, the more people actually it's more difficult for you to to cultivate the culture thing.
How many staff do you have now?
No,
100?
actually we are very lean.
Lean, right?
Yeah,
I
very
remember
lean.
you telling me.
We only have less than 100 people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct, yes.
Because you see, we only that's another actually something we didn't share.
Yeah.
Actually, for us, actually, we only do which think we is a value added. We only have the the product design and the marketing and the after sales. So all this the so-called the labor intensive, the manufacturing,
Yeah.
and logistics,
yes, you
yeah,
mentioned.
even warehousing, actually we engage third party to operate.
Yep.
So and that's why actually we can do what we believe is really value added. Yeah, to build a brand.
Yep.
And to serve the customer. That's a two, basically is the main thing I'm doing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's also a way to
Yeah.
be more nimble in the
Yeah, that's right.
into
That's
your,
right.
your business model. Yes.
And especially nowadays in the AI the era, right? You have to be lean. You have to be lean.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in Singapore context, actually, the labor cost is quite,
Yes, correct.
quite.
I believe that
Yeah.
everyone hear this video podcast can take a lot of learning from you on how to structure a new age business and also building a brand that cares.
No, we are still learning, and we are still very small, and I believe everybody has their own perspective. What I share is just what I observe. And I believe what I learned from my humble journey. And through the past few years, and even the years before that. Yeah, and I hope actually you can take a reference and take as a reference. Mine necessary is to everything you echo with you, but Yeah, but I think you can take it as a reference,
Yeah,
and take a
definitely,
reference.
definitely.
Yeah.
You have been through a lot more journey than most Singaporeans to really be able to scale it at this level. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jerry.
Thank you so
and
much. Yeah.
thank you
Thank you.
having you on
Yeah.
online, and
Thank you. Thank you.
have a good trip.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you all.